you have anything at home?
Welcome to our second edition of Desert Island Torah with our guest, Rachel Fink. Rachel was appointed head teacher of JFS in 2018, which is the largest Jewish school in Europe. Prior to this, she had been the head teacher of Hasmonean Girls' School. She is a graduate of both the Ashdown Fellowship and Bradfield Women's Programs, both of which are aimed at developing leadership within the Anglo-Jewry educational system. Rachel has also taken a lead role in supporting the development of mental health and well-being in Jewish schools and has expertise in Holocaust education. Rachel Fink, welcome to Desert Island Torah.
Thank you.
So tell us, what would be the first piece of Torah which you would take to a desert island as a castaway?
So I think the piece of Torah from Chumash, which speaks to me enormously, is Chet HaMeraglim, which might be an unusual choice because it turns out to be the beginning of the darkest episodes in Jewish history. We know it, Tisha B'Av emanates from there, and therefore it's a dark day for our people. But I've always been fascinated with this episode. I think where it began is it's a very visual piece. You think about the Meraglim and the description of the fruit and the people and the land as the Meraglim are seeing it, plus the whole concept of what does it mean to be a leader, because you've got ostensibly 12 people who are the leaders of their own Shvatim, and Moshe. It's all about leaders and the way they behave. But I think my first sort of, if you like, love affair with Chet HaMeraglim was when I was on Israel tour with Rabbi Akiva in, I'm going to say 1985, something around then.
Well, the year when I was born.
All right, okay, don't rub it in. I remember we were staying in Kfar Etzion, and we'd arrived at the youth hostel, and our madrich at the time said, there's an optional teal. So, if you want to rest, you can rest, but if you fancy a teal, let's go. So being the kino that I was, and having actually spent a lot of time in Israel, particularly during 9th grade when I was at JFS, I'd done their 5-month residential program. So I'd kind of been everywhere, through that experience and relatives who knew Israel back. I thought, wait a minute, there's an opportunity for me to go somewhere I haven't been, and, it'll be bespoke. It turned out to be my first experience where someone really stood with a Tanakh in their hand in a setting. Now, it may have been my teenage imagination, it might have been wishful thinking, but we got to Nachal Eshkol at the height of the grape season. And I'm telling you, there are very large bunches of grapes there. That's what stuck in my memory, that kind of whatever you make of Tanakh, here is a visual that matches the text. So that was kind of why I really loved that experience, and it really left an imprint on me. And I've always remembered that sort of deal where perhaps half the group went, maybe we were 15, and we're 15 of us out of 30, and we wandered around, and the madrich was reading the psukim from the Tanakh, and I'm thinking, how can anybody go back and then say, actually, we don't want to be here? But sort of, as I've grown up, the story of the Meraglim and the whole parsha has taken on new meaning. Firstly, it was my eldest son's bar mitzvah parsha, so we have a sort of family affinity to it. But one of the other things is that I suddenly recognized, as I sort of really immersed myself in the Yamim Noraim and in the liturgy, particularly for Yom Kippur. My husband's a Shaliach Tzibor in Bushi. That's where he grew up. So every Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we go and stay with my in-laws, and he davens in the shul. So I'm really au fait with the tefillot because he's practicing at home, etc. And it suddenly occurred to me that the liturgy for Yom Kippur is completely based around the story of the Meraglim. And what I couldn't work out is, why was this picked? Because actually, the biggest sin, surely, that the Jewish people collectively did was Chet HaEgel. So when I started doing a bit of research, I discovered that actually there's a whole sort of conversation about why this and not this. And it's really interesting because in the episode of the spies, the people do something wrong. There's no atonement. The stakes are high. And what you see is, rather than Moshe turning around to the people and saying, you need to ask for forgiveness, he turns around to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and says, you've got to forgive the people, which is really, really interesting. And I think the nuts and bolts of this are about, why does Hashem forgive us? And what do we learn from it as human beings? And I think that, there's two things. I think, first of all, and the Chama Leibowitz says that Hashem forgives us because he's inclined towards forgiveness. It's less to do with us feeling sorry. So then the obvious question arises is, if Hashem's going to forgive us, why do we all bother going to shul on Yom Kippur anyway? Because he's going to forgive us. What do we need to be there for? This concept that we dust down our machzah, we go to shul, we say it all, and the next day we carry on as we were. And that's regardless of how frum we are. There's a very few people who suddenly you see a real change in them post Yom Kippur, and it wears off with time. So really, the concept is, we turn up. We don't turn up to say we're sorry. We turn up because we're committed to being Hashem's people, and we get forgiven simply because we turned up. And it's about the fact that we are committed to this covenant with Hashem, and it doesn't really matter how rocky our relationship might get with him over time. We're committed to deep love. Now, actually, what I've come to understand about this episode in Torah is actually it's a lesson for parents. It's about unconditional love. That our children over time can often do things when we really don't like what they've done. We don't like them as people for what they've done, but we love them because they're our children. And that's what Hashem is saying. Yeah, I'm a bit moody, I'm a bit annoyed with you, but I'm going to get over it because I made a commitment to you. And that's a lesson for us as parents as we bring children into this world, or for those people who adopt children or foster. We're making a commitment to look after them and to nurture them. Now, that's not a commitment based on somebody else's behavior. A commitment is something that you agree to do. So as a parent, we give unconditional love. It doesn't matter what our kids do or how they turn out. And maybe they don't live the lives that we want them to live, but they're our kids and we love them unconditionally because they always need to have a champion on their side. And I heard once a beautiful idea, and I recall it every time we get to that tefillah in Yom Kippur. The phrase from the Meraglim that we say is become famous because of Yom Kippur, Vayomer Hashem salachti kidvarecha, i.e. Hashem is telling Moshe that he has forgiven kidvarecha, as you suggested. And everyone says, what's that little key? No letter, we believe, is there by chance. And the explanation I heard, which I carry with me every time, and it really impacts on me emotionally when we sing on Yom Kippur. We get to the point and we, Salachti ki dvarecha, ki because ki anu amecha. We are here because we are your people. And that ki from ki anu amecha links us with the ki from ki dvarecha. And I think that this episode in Tanakh, for me personally, as a direction of what it means to be a parent, what is good parenting, it's not about letting your kids do whatever they like, but it is saying, I will love you unconditionally, even at the times when I have to set boundaries or do things that are difficult or set you back on a path or accept that you're going to live life differently. But, I brought you into this world. That was a tircha in itself. I'm not going to give up on you. And I think that we learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is teaching us as adults, that's how to parent, through unconditional love.
Wow, lots of incredible ideas. That was wonderful. Just what I just find as an anecdote, you went on tour. You were inspired by this madrich, by this madricha. They were being innovative. They brought the Torah to life, but they probably don't even realize the impact that they had on you. For them, they were just a regular day in the office. They were just doing what they did. But it's incredible to see that the impact that they could have without them even knowing it.
That's very much, and I think that's actually an important point regarding Jewish education. we don't know when and how we're making an impact on other people. Things that we say, places that we go to or take people to, experiences that we offer impact people in different ways. And we have no idea of when and how that has happened. And I think we've all got people like that. But if we went to them and said, did you know? They would say, no, I had no idea.
Wow. What incredible. So right, the Miraculum was Torah piece number 1. What's the second piece, Rachel, that you would take to a desert island?
So the second piece I have chosen is Megillah Esther, which we're recording this not just after Rosh Chodesh Adar. Today is actually a very important day for me. It's an anniversary of a difficult time in my teaching career. We lost students. Purim is supposed to be a happy time. And the lead up to Purim in my school in Israel was a real challenge for us because 24 years ago, we lost students on a teal just after Rosh Chodesh Adar. But Megillah Esther has come to mean a great deal to me, the whole period of Purim, for lots and lots of reasons. So I didn't like Purim as a child. I didn't like the whole noise, the dressing up thing. It wasn't my bag at all. And I just decided once I had my own family that I would dive in and we would really, really make a big deal of Purim. And we were talking yesterday about what Purim is going to be like this year. And I've come to the conclusion that actually Purim during lockdown is harder than Seder night, because at least Seder night, you have a certain type of framework, however few the people are sitting around the table. But Purim is all about guests and other people and sharing and giving. So it's really going to be quite a challenge this year. And I'm kind of known for my wacky mishloach manot. But I've made a decision that this year it's going to be calmer, quieter, and the minimum, because we have to set an example about what we're doing with COVID. But I absolutely adore Purim with my family. Suda is a massive deal. Mishloach manot is a massive deal. But I think it's come to mean much more to me over the last few years for 2 reasons. One is recent. I say recently, but I think it must be going on for 6 or 7 years. I learned to read a parak of the Megillah, and I belong to Alei Tzion, and there is always a women's Megillah reading. And one year I decided, along with my older daughter, who encouraged me, let's go and learn. And every year since that year, I have, at the women's Megillah reading in the evening, I have learned Perek Shishi of the Megillah, which is my favorite because it's it's when everything starts turning around. And
that's a great chapter.
It's a great chapter, very pantomime-esque, if you like, tells you a lot of interesting things. But I think it's really interesting because I also remember learning Megillah Esther when I was in SEM, and I had good Hebrew skills. I'd left school being able to speak fluent Hebrew, but my text skills were okay. I'd never been taught to read between the lines, and there's a lot of opportunity to read between the lines in the Megillah. And obviously, I really liked the idea of Yad Hashem, sort of from the linguistic perspective. I love Esther, although Esther's not my favorite name, but I love the persona that she is. She's a strong female character, and I like the way that over time, within an Orthodox framework, this is an obvious opportunity for women to make their mark in a way that is meaningful to them. The first women's Megillah reading I actually went to was many years ago, just after my, was he born just before or after? I think I was very heavily pregnant. I had a baby just after Purim. One of my kids just born just after Purim. And I didn't want to go to shul. So there was a women's Megillah reading in the house, and there were like 5 women there, and I'd never ever been to a women's Megillah reading. It was very sort of out of my comfort zone. But I would say what Megillah Esther represents for me is the fact that it reflects the femininity in our household. I've got 2 boys and 2 girls, and my girls both learned in seminaries that are very forward-thinking. One learned in Migdalos and one learned in Nishmat. And
great places.
Amazing places that really support and promote the learning of Torah for women on an equal standing without compromising orthodoxy, either of them. And their experiences have influenced our household over time. So it's about us learning from our children. But interesting, when I was sort of thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I came across another explanation that actually Rafi Zaram shared about Megillah, which I think is also very pertinent to our times. He said, there's a lot of talk about Hashem being, hidden. He's not there, he's not hidden. But actually, he said that Hashem is absent completely. The concept of God was not evident in Persian society. So in the opening chapter of the Megillah, there is no sort of mention of any type of gods at the party that Achashverosh is having. So it's not a case of just our Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't appear. No gods appear ever. And he's telling us that actually Persia was quite a faithless society. So the one of the lessons of Megillah is that we can maintain religious commitment even if we live in a faithless society. And in some respects, Megillah Esther bridges the old and new worlds, an old world where miracles were really obvious, really evident, religion was really prominent and very central and very influential. And with Esther being incorporated as the last book of the canon, if you like, it's the stepping stone to a world in which we live where we don't see necessarily very overt nisim, and we live in a society that many people sort of reject God and certainly organized religion. I think it's almost like a bridge between a supernatural and a natural world. But I think the final piece in the jigsaw puzzle for me about the importance of Megillah Esther, and I brought one to show you, is this. I don't know if you can see it the right way around on the camera.
Oh, wow, the JFS Megillah Esther. Wow, fantastic.
So this is the gift that we give every year to our graduates, our year 13 graduates, because in the middle, it's not just a Megillah, it's all their school photos. This is their yearbook. And the reason it's their yearbook is because the school's motto is Ora Vikar, which is directly to Megillah Esther. And one of the first things that I established when I came to JFS as head was that there wasn't a common understanding. In fact, there was no understanding of really what was the school motto, what did it mean, and what was it requiring of us. And that's kind of the first bit of Jewish teaching I did in the school. And I taught them the phrase Ora Vikar. I taught how it came from Havdalah, but it originated in the Megillah. And what does it mean when we talk about bringing light and honor? And it's talking about a mission of responsibility and Jewish values that are so steeped in the Megillah, but still so relevant for today. And those in-between words of Sason and Simcha are often explained as two different types of joy, internal and external, which fits very nicely with the way we talk about well-being today. Well-being is our internal contentment. So for me, sort of that sort of is the icing on the cake in terms of the relevance of Megillah Esther in my life. And I'm very much looking forward. This year, we're managing to have a virtual women's reading. We have Clough at school, and we are going to read the Megillah to our girls, because that's something else I've instituted. This will be the third year now where we've had Purim is a massive event at JFS, and there's usually lots of different Megillah readings, and there is now a girls-only Megillah reading as well, because I have several girls who are competent and able, and we will be doing that again this year online.
Okay, Kol hakavod for these outstanding innovations. Out of interest, does that school motto, does it go back to the 1700s when the school was started, or we just don't know?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. I have tried to research it. It certainly was on the school badge when I was a student at JFS. It's always been there. The question is, where did it originate and why was it chosen? So if somebody out there knows, I would love to hear the answer, because we cannot find the answer to that question.
Right. And so what I love about Megillah Esther was that you only really appreciated the Megillah, you only really appreciated Purim when you got involved, when you read a chapter at the women's Megillah reading. Before, when you were on the sidelines, it didn't mean as much to you. Only when you got involved did you begin to understand, and did you begin to appreciate on a new level what the holiday is about. It shows the importance not of standing on the sidelines and looking at things from afar, but getting involved in the community, reading the Megillah, getting involved with the community, getting involved with the shul, getting involved with different initiatives that we do as a community. Because if you do, then it could really be transformative, and your story is just one example. So I absolutely love that. Okay, so we've heard the first two pieces. What's the third piece that you would take to a desert island as a castaway?
Okay, so you asked me to choose something from Tanakh and maybe something from Talmud. So I've picked my favorite Talmud story. I'm not a great Talmud scholar. I grew up in an era where that was less available. My girls are far better at it than me. But the episode that I picked is something that's actually very personal to me. I know I've referenced my family in both my selections so far. I think this one tops it all because I can get everybody in. And it's the story that appears at the end of Masechet Makot, which seems a bit out of place, but it's the story of Rabbi Akiva and how he is arriving after the Chorban on Har Tzofim, and he's with the other Rabbanim, and they are looking at the Chorban of Bayit Sheni. And it's all about Rabbi Akiva's approach to this devastation and desolation before him, as opposed to the people he's walking with. This is a very personal story to me. I always identified with Rabbi Akiva growing up. I always like to say, if there were rabbi stickers like there'd been Panini football stickers, I just swapped all of mine for Rabbi Akiva. I'm not entirely sure why. I was very involved in Bnei Akiva, but I loved the stories about the sort of person that he was, how, I think he represents something very unique. He established himself very late in life. There's a lesson there for never give up. It's never too late to study. It's never too late to make something of yourself. He's really optimistic. He always sees the positive in difficult situations, whether it's standing in front of Har HaBayit, whether it's at the moment that he's about to lose his life, but he finds an experience there. The famous story about how he understands what it means, Chol nafshecha, Chol modecha, when you're reciting the Shema in that terrible situation. You could argue he's one of the original examples of social mobility. He came from nothing, but education enabled him to be something really, really great. He still made it to the top. Why is this story so important to me is when my youngest daughter was born at the Kiddush after her naming, a member of our Kehillah in Israel said, you do realize you've kind of made a set out of the names of your children. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he told the story that appears at the end of Masechet Avot. And he said, this is the story of Rabbi Akiva walking across Har HaBayit, and he sees a fox. And they're all wailing, all the other Rabbanim are wailing, and he is laughing. And they look at him and they say, Akiva, why are you laughing? And he said, I'm laughing because I know Hashem is going to keep his promise, because there's a prophecy in Zechariah that talks about how, Hashem is going to absolutely destroy the Beit HaMikdash, the centrality of life. And then it goes on to talk about how he will rebuild, and the Geulah will come, and he will, we will see another Beit HaMikdash, we will see Yemot HaMashiach. And that's why I'm laughing, because if the first part of the prophecy has come true, then we know the second part of the prophecy, however long we need to wait, is also going to come true. Why is that important to me? And what did this friend say at the Kiddush? I just named my daughter Moria. My eldest son is called Yehuda, my daughter is called Geulah, and my other son is called Akiva. So he said to me, you are telling the story of Rabbi Akiva as he stands on Har HaMoriah, which is in Harei Yehuda, and he's talking about the Geulah. And he said, and you didn't realize, but you've put these names together. And I've always carried that story with me about what my children mean as a unit to me. But I think there are other things that we can learn. What I didn't know, and my name is Rachel, what I didn't know, and I read this in a commentary from the Petach Einaim on this section, and it talks about Rabbi Akiva Mitzachek. He's laughing. And the gematria of Mutzachek is 238. And if you like a good gematria, then the gematria of my name, Rachel, is also 238. And we know that Rachel mevaka al baneha, she is watching the Geula happen, but she knows v'shavu vanim ligvulam, and the children will return. And I think sort of my strong Zionism has always linked me to Rachel Imeinu derech Bethlehem, knowing that the people have left, but they're going to come back again. So, as I've been preparing for this, I've discovered something new that I didn't know, that kind of links this episode to my namesake as well. There's an interesting concept as well. Why does this story appear in Makot and not Gittin? Because most of the stories about Chorban Habayit appear in Masechet Gittin, which is about divorce. And it suggests that there's a link between divorce and the separation of the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. But actually, most of the stories about the Chorban appear in Perek Chamishi, which is more about damages. It's not really about divorce. So the Chorban is about a breakdown of a relationship, not about the end of a relationship. And this story about Rabbi Akiva, which seems completely random, just comes at the end of Masechet Makot, after discussions about the punishment of karet, which is about being cut off, which is, as we know, probably the worst punishment we could get. And it's suggesting you sometimes have to hit rock bottom before you can build yourself up again. So you could argue that the Chorban of both Batei HaMikdash were a result of a real sin and real turning away. So effectively, Hashem wants to divorce the Jewish people, but actually, and it takes us right back to Chet HaMeraglim, he's made this eternal covenant. So he's chosen to direct his anger at buildings, i.e. in the Beit HaMikdash, rather than in the people himself. So yes, things were terrible after the Chorban, but he destroyed the buildings, he didn't destroy the people. And he went back to that whole concept. I made a commitment to the Jewish people, and I'm keeping that commitment however hard things get. And Akiva, the optimist, recognized this. So for me, I think this envelops, and these three different sections reflect many important aspects and experiences in my own family, but I also think they reflect, each of them in their own way, leadership of some description. So when I turn to perhaps for inspiration about leadership, I see it in my favorite passages of Torah and Jewish texts.
So when it comes to this story in Makot, which you just spoke about, it strikes a chord with me because it shows the importance of looking to the future, not just always thinking about the past. And because that's what Rabbi Akiva was. All the other rabbis were looking at the past. Rabbi Akiva was focusing on the future. And this lesson is always important. I'm sure it's important as a head teacher of JFS, but it's also important for us now. We're going through the COVID-19 crisis. Yes, we've got to look at what happened in the past, but we've got to be focused on the future. And this is a great message. And all of what you said was incredible. And but for me personally, whenever I read this Gemara, this is a message which I try to take to heart.
And we share it a lot. Bizarrely, my son is about to get married, and we've adjusted the wedding, and it turns out that his Ufruf will now be on his Bar Mitzvah Sedra. So we will be reading Chet HaMeraglim as a family on the Shabbat before his wedding, because Shalach Lecha was his parasha. So it's, what goes around comes. Somebody's telling me something somewhere. You got to stick to these parashiot because they are definitely belong to your family. So I feel like we've taken ownership of them.
Yeah, in 3 and a bit years, my oldest son Yishai, his Mitzvah Sedra is also Shalach Lecha. So,
it's great. It's great parasha. Great stuff.
Yeah, wonderful. So there you have it. Rachel's 3 pieces of Torah, the episodes of the spies, Megillah Esther, and the story of Rabbi Akiva in Jerusalem. All of these pieces are extremely important with profound messages. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing these ideas with us, and we wish you every success leading JFS, which is one of our community's most treasured institutions. Rachel, thank you.
Thank you very much.